All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Sales Vitamin Podcast. We have got a super episode today. We are going to talk about some things that we don't talk about a whole lot, and that's the mindset and how you get dialed in and focused today. We have Dr. Steve Taubman. He's an author, speaker, mindfulness coach. He's touched over 350,000 by his message. You've seen him on Fox, CBS, MTV, CNBC, and he's worked with organizations such as Nissan, IBM, Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, and State Farm, and a ton more. He's an empowerment expert, results catalyst. He's even a licensed pilot, but most of all, he loves hanging out with his dog, Woody. So I am excited to have Dr. Steve Taubman on the show today to help us out with our performance mindset.
What an absolute pleasure to be here. I wish I could bring Woody in and introduce him to you too, but
Yeah.
I'm going to be stuck with just me right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I'm excited to have you, Steve, on the show because we do talk a lot about sales tips and just tactics and things like that. But I think it's really, you have a lot of sports teams, a lot of coaches. They all have coaches. They all have mindset people that work with them on that. And I think that's huge. So I think today's episode is going to be really enlightening for everybody. But before we get into that, I know you've got a story as well. You were a thriving chiropractor, and then you kind of figured out you kind of had this inner and outer success kind of struggle. So kind of set the backstage for your, how you got where you're at right now.
Sure. Well, absolutely. First and foremost, we all have our inner and our outer journeys, and hopefully they're kind of moving in the same direction. For me, they were for a while, and then they kind of pivoted. And so I was very successful from an outer standpoint in my chiropractic practice. I was helping a lot of people. I was making a lot of money, and I was, I had all the credibility in the world doing that. And at the same time, there was something that was starting to tug at me and told me, there's something more, there's something else, there's something different. I don't know exactly what it is, but something, there's some sense that that I'm not aligned. And I finally made the, kind of major and somewhat, now that I think about it, kind of courageous leap. I don't know if I would have been smart and courageous enough to do it now, but I left my practice. I sold my practice, and I did some traveling, and it took some time to contemplate who I was and what I wanted, and to rediscover my path, which then led me to an entirely different way of impacting people. Now I was already doing work to help people and to heal people, but it was more the body than the mind. And I started realizing that if I'm going to be helpful in the world in the way that I've been naturally gifted to be helpful, it's going to have to involve helping people overcome their mental barriers to success, to well-being. And so now I really get to play that game around both health, wealth, happiness, and mental well-being as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Your show is and when you come and work with companies and organizations, one of the things that I got out of it, it's kind of a unique approach because it's entertainment, it's entertaining. You're very entertaining, but there's also a results oriented. And when people come away from it, from the things I saw, they really come away with some solid, whether it's sales or business results. How do you balance that between the entertainment side, but then, I've got to provide real value if I'm speaking with a group of sales professionals or sales managers, how do you balance that?
Well, it's got to start out with intention. What's your intention? I talk at length with my clients, my prospects, to find out what it is that they need or want. What does your sales team need? What do you as a sales professional need to take your business to the next level? And more often than not, it's not more sales tips. More often than not, it's not, hey, here's a really neat idea. And I've got plenty of those ideas too. And I usually share them. I've got great marketing tips and whatnot. But if I were to look for the common denominator that makes some people highly successful and other people just kind of wannabes, it's almost always what's going on between their ears and what they believe. And so the balance between the entertainment and the mastery and the coaching comes from, first of all, the recognition that entertainment is a great way to open the door.
Right.
People who are laughing, who are smiling, who are, they've got to set aside their critical factor, that part of them that's holding on to their existing beliefs. And entertainment, laughter, astonishment are great ways to do that. So that's what makes the hypnosis so fascinating, because on the one hand, it's really entertaining, and it lowers the bar, it lowers the walls. But on the other hand, it is in and of itself a lesson.
Yeah.
Right. And the lesson that hypnosis demonstrates, if you were to ever see a hypnosis show and watch me take somebody who's, thinks they're stuck to their chair, or a guy who thinks he's pregnant, or some crazy thing like that. It's like, how does this happen? How is it possible for somebody to accept this belief?
Yeah.
And what happens when they accept that belief? And what it comes down to ultimately is, most of the things that we believe are the result of old programming that we received early in life. Some of us were more fortunate than others, got great programming, we're really confident, we feel awesome about ourselves. And other people are carrying around the burden of lack of confidence, low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, etc. And you could push as hard as you can against those obstacles and still not become successful, because you've got at some point to address that stuff. You've got to address the beliefs that are influencing the actions you're willing to take. So I teach it like this. I'll say, once I've got people recognizing this relationship, through laughter, through fun, through astonishment, is I'll lay out this concept of a pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid is your results. You're in sales. You have a quota you need to meet, or maybe a sales objective, or maybe you want to hit a particular landmark that's going to get you on that next cruise, or whatever it happens to be. And that result sits on top of the actions you take. In other words, unless you take the proper actions, you're not going to get those results. Well, what a lot of people do is they just try harder to take those actions, or they just go into what we call magical thinking. It's going
Yeah.
to happen for me no matter what. And then they don't take the actions, and then of course they don't get the results, and then they blame everybody but themselves.
Right.
Right. And then you've got the people who are a little bit more conscious, who understand that even the actions sit on top of something else, and the actions sit on top of beliefs. Right. If your actions are not consistent with your beliefs, if you aren't deeply entrenched in the concept that I am worthy, my business is worthy, my product is worthy, I love the people I work with, there are all these things that live at the level of belief that fuel the actions you're going to take and make them congruent. And you know what I mean by congruent? So you could be doing the exact same thing as somebody else, but if you're doing it without the belief in what you're doing, it's going to read through. People are going to sense that you're not in alignment with yourself. And so sometimes it's as simple as that. You take somebody who's been languishing, they've been going for a long time, not being great in sales. And all you need to do is to give them a little, 10-degree tweak in their belief system. And they already have all the tools they need. They just aren't congruent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's interesting. You talk about, and it's really one of your books, is mental resilience. And I think just purely from our listener standpoint on the sales side, but really in life in general, but from a sales perspective right now, that mental resilience, in fact, you've got a book, Bulletproof.
Yeah.
Talk about that mental resilience and how important that is, not only to a sales professional, but really in life, because I think you see all the successful people I see and talk with, they have that.
Yeah. Well, we're taught, particularly in our very Western model, we grow up believing that the way to be resilient is to put up armor between us and the world around us. And so you see people who are kind of shut off, cut off from themselves. They don't have a great deal of emotional intelligence or critical thinking, because their concept of resilience is, I've got to like gird my loins and, pretend I don't feel what I feel. And that's a very weak form of resilience. And it's the kind most people use, just that kind of pure grit, but hanging on by your thumb, so to speak. And if you think about somebody who's trying to quit smoking as a good example of that, or who's an alcoholic who's letting go of drinking, there's a whole concept of what they call the dry drunk.
Yeah.
A dry drunk is somebody, they're not drinking anymore, but they're still miserable. They're still not functioning well in society, because their concept of resilience is grit your teeth and bear the pain. But there's another whole side to resilience, and we learn a lot about this through mindfulness techniques. We understand that when you start becoming very present to whatever it is that you are feeling, without being sucked into it, without being um, emotionally thrown off course by it. In other words, you begin to develop the ability to be the non-judgmental witness of your own feelings, then those feelings cease to have the power over you, and yet you're still in alignment, right? So instead of putting up armor and walls, what you do is you sort of become vulnerable in a way that allows whatever's coming at you to move through. If you've ever looked at some of the martial arts, the example would be Aikido,
Hmm.
right? In Aikido, as opposed to typical karate, with karate, somebody, throws a karate chop and you block it. So it's force meeting force. And that's one way to deal with force coming at you. The other way is to guide it elsewhere,
Right.
right? And that's what the Aikido practitioner does. You come at them and they just whoosh.
Okay.
They're untouchable. So a great sales professional becomes untouchable. Great sales professional doesn't have that kind of guarded armor around them, and their experience of resilience is, okay, so something happened. I legitimately understand that this is just one occurrence among many, and I'm able to just let it go and move on to the next one. And that's a big part of resilience. Is this we in the book, I tell a lot of stories and I have a lot of exercises, but all of the exercises are designed to start moving your consciousness, moving your thinking in the direction of being able to let things go more quickly,
Yeah.
right? Not ruminate. I mean, every one of us does that, right? Don't you have those times when something happens and you just can't let it go? I had
Yeah.
that the other day. Somebody wrote a nasty note on our Facebook page about chiropractors. My
Okay.
background is chiropractic, and this guy was, one of these people who thinks chiropractic is all quackery and everything. And it hooked me. I spent a bunch of the day like thinking about responses. Now I know that there's nothing I'm going to be able to do
Yeah.
to change the way this guy thinks, but that was in the moment what I thought resilience was. And I've got to win the fight. A better version of resilience would have been, okay, you're entitled to your opinion. Let me get back to the more important stuff I need to get back to.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I could
You spent a
prioritize.
lot of energy on something that you really didn't need to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How from and that's powerful information when you look at sales. How much time do you think the average sales professional spends on their mental improvement and versus what they actually do? So how much do they spend versus, hey, here's how much they really should spend on their mental improvement to be better sales professional, versus tactics, skills, techniques, which are important. But if you were to put a percentage on it, what would you say?
Well, first, let me say that nobody's ever asked me that question before, and it's a great question. So
Yeah.
thanks. I'd say between 0 and 20%. So most people put no effort into it whatsoever. They're not observing themselves. They're not looking at their own mental process. What they're doing is looking at the results they're getting. And if they're not getting the results they want, then they're looking at the actions and trying to change the actions. But they're very seldom digging in and seeing, okay, what am I believing right now? How present am I? Can I get my mind quiet?
Yeah.
Can I step back from, like my story? Can I step back from the habitual way my mind works? Just notice it, but not get hooked by it. That's something most people don't do because it's, quite frankly, it's not pleasant.
Yeah.
The process of becoming introspective and self-aware means you're going to be looking at things about yourself that you don't like to look at. Right? It's like turning on a
Yeah.
light in a dirty room and suddenly it's like, I don't know, turn that light off, close that door, let me leave that part of the house. I don't want to go there. But but in reality, those who do put effort into it, and the percentage, when we look at the 80-20 rule, we usually say that 20% of your success is your skill set, but 80% is your mindset.
Right.
And if we're lucky, people are putting in 20% on their mindset and 80% on their skill set. So what we recommend is that you discipline yourself to have periods of the time during the day. Doesn't have to dominate your day. It doesn't have to dominate every moment of your thinking, but you create a structure, a discipline, a set of rituals perhaps that essentially guide you to make your mindset something you're thinking about, that you're aware of. For example, you finish up a sales call or you finish up a meeting with somebody that you've been working your skills, so to speak, and now you step back from it, and you've got to have a legitimate way of processing what just happened.
Right.
Right? Because what do most people do? If the sale didn't go their way, they just start beating themselves up and feeling badly, and it doesn't really serve them. So we have to have a reproducible way of processing what just happened. What did I feel? What did they feel? What did I do well? What could I have done better? So that you start to point the light at yourself and you start to develop self-awareness in that way. Another way is that we wake up in the morning and we have some ritual. Maybe maybe we meditate for 5-10 minutes in the morning and in the evening, and we quiet our minds. I don't know anybody who's highly successful and happy who isn't using some form of meditation or mindfulness at this point in history. It used to be people would say, oh, that's just a bunch of nonsense. But the
Right.
research now is so profound. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that if you don't take the time, and it doesn't have to be a long time, to quiet your mind, to let all the chatter of your brain kind of just float away and get centered, then you're the victim of your thinking.
Yeah.
And that's where you start becoming more irritable, more destructible. Things happen and, you fall apart. That's just because you're not observing your experience. You're just living it. You're the victim of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say, I'm not going to say, okay, you need to shift everything to an 80% focus, but I would say that if you could move from the 10 or 20% you're at right now and just build in a few strategies, a few tools. Bulletproof we've got probably about 30 solid tools. None of them take more than 5 minutes. And you just practice one or two of them every day, and they begin to change you in very fundamental ways that you notice, not maybe while you're sitting there doing the practice, but the next time you've got a presentation, you'll feel the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've also got the audio series that you have. It's that Magic of Inner Selling. And that's on Sales Mastery. And does that kind of have this mindset coaching involved in it as well? Talk a little bit about that program and kind of what do you delve into from a sales perspective on that?
Yeah, the first thing I talk about is that the best salesman I know is my dog, Woody, because he always gets his way without having to force me into it. He knows how to give love before receiving what he wants. And there are these sort of qualities that you can learn from your dog, right? If you understand the methods that they're using on you, you're like, wow, that really worked. I think maybe I should try that. So the first thing I realized in studying the materials for that book was a lot of it is just subtle attitudinal things, attitudes and habits of sales professionalism. And so we talk about organizing. How organized are you? Because your organization actually, or your lack of organization, starts to show up in many ways. And it raises your agitation level. So organization, right? And then energize. We talk about energizing because a good sales professional exudes a kind of an energy that's magnetic.
Yeah.
And when your energy is low, then it becomes a lot harder to project that. And you may be the last one to know it, but everybody around you kind of gets that you're a downer. So you really have to have some focus. Again, that 80%, that quality of understanding where you're at in terms of your energy level. That's an important piece, right?
Yeah.
Then we start to look at that business of noticing what I automatically do and how I automatically react to all the situations that happen.
Yeah.
Right? And then we start to look at what is it about this quality that I'm calling mindfulness or presence, this ability to just get quiet, that has a direct impact on your sales professionalism and on your results. And what it really comes down to is that somebody who's highly present has a tendency to be aware of or to notice things that other people walk right past. Opportunities, a client says something, you hear it.
Yeah.
And that becomes the road into the sale. That's the one thing. Had you not heard it, had you not paid attention to it, you would have been beating your head against the wall. But it's that quality of spotting opportunities, and that's something you can't think your way into. You've got to practice your way into.
Huh. Do you think sales? That's an interesting point. So I can think my way and yep, well, I'm real good at that. I'm real good at that. But then again, if I don't do that, that's a big distinction. I can say, well, I'm a great prospector. You can tell yourself that all day long, right?
Yeah.
From a mental side of it. But like you said, I think you got to be able to add that practice piece into it, like an athlete.
Exactly like an athlete. That's why athletes, and I work with athletes, and I've worked with Navy SEALs, and a lot of these people who have recognized that mastery requires a lot of practice and repetition. If you want a quiet mind and you want a mind that's able to see opportunity that other people miss, and that means doing mindfulness practices or meditation practices, you can no more think your way into or read about those practices and have them work than you could read about push-ups and get stronger.
Right.
Right. You got to be doing it. So,
Yeah.
so it's the repetitions. And so we always say that your capacity to thrive in the world happily, joyfully, with a sense of mastery, whether it's in business or in your personal life, is something that that you only get to experience if you commit to doing the work.
Yeah. It's kind of like golf. I can watch, and I play, I love golf, but if
Yeah.
I can watch videos, I can read books, and I can be a great knowledge seeker about golf. But until I go practice, learn how to play and do that, then it really doesn't matter. So I think
No.
that's kind of what you're telling the listeners is, that mental side of it, you've got to practice that mental side of it to get the benefit of it.
And you brought something up earlier that I just wanted to reiterate, which is, most, if not all of the great performers in any great field, whether we're talking about actors or athletes or warriors, they all have a coach.
Yeah.
They all have a coach. You can't, the one thing is, like, you could practice your swing from now till doomsday, but if you're not practicing it correctly, that's going to be a problem too.
Yeah.
So we often need that third party view of things, because none of us are, well, first of all, none of us are as smart as all of us.
Right.
Right? There's always that kind of seeing things through the eyes of somebody other than ourselves always helps to elevate our consciousness and our results.
Yeah. Now, what separates Dr. Steve Taubman and the way he approaches and the way he works with organizations from, let's say, just other people that do what you do? What separates you? How do you differentiate yourself?
Well, first of all, I'm one of the original practical mindfulness guys, meaning that
Yeah.
I'm bringing that lens in that most people don't bring in. I'm bringing in the lens of, let's look deeper. Let's give you the tools so you can look deeper. And then it becomes a more personal experience in a way. I'm working personally with the sales manager, working personally with the individuals on the team, and I'm noticing what they don't see about themselves. It's what are their blind spots,
Yeah.
and then also what are they doing when they become triggered. What I mean by triggered, like, oh, I'm depressed, I'm discouraged, I'm frustrated, all the negative emotions that get in the way of being really good at what you do. There are ways of utilizing that energy, the energy of frustration, that catapult you to a higher level, or you could use that energy the way most people use it, which is like a brick to hit themselves over the head with. And so that's a kind of, it's really about applying wisdom to the process. And that's something that most people don't do, because it takes a little bit more, time and focus,
Yeah.
rather than just spewing platitudes, right? I could be giving you platitudes and, the 5 this or the 3 that, but if I'm face to face with you and I can see what you're challenged by, and I could have you spot what that is and have you get that aha moment.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally get it now. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for. We're looking for transformation at the very personal level.
Yeah. And that's powerful. I love the book UnHypnosis. The
Yeah.
title caught me right away. I was like, UnHypnosis, that's kind of, but the book's about starting over.
It is.
And,
Yep.
and talk me through a little bit about listeners through that, because starting over is, quite frankly, a lot of people are doing that now. I
Well,
mean,
now for a
much
lot
like
of people,
yourself years ago, but a lot of people, that's not uncommon anymore. But
no,
are
of
they
course,
doing it right? That's the
right.
key.
It certainly wasn't common when I did it. It was weird when I did it,
Yeah.
and now it's become very common. And now with COVID, it's becoming a necessity for a lot of people. So, so at some point in our lives, we've got to consider looking at other options. Just for no other reason than just to realize that we're not identified or by our jobs. We're not defined by our jobs.
Right.
But I'm not just a this or a that. And a lot of people who have spent a lot of time in one job, and then suddenly the rug gets pulled out from under them. It's really disorienting, because who am I if I'm not the COO, or who am I if I'm not the, the head salesman in this business? It's disorienting. So unhypnosis, first of all, the concept of unhypnosis is that we've all become hypnotized throughout our lives. We've been programmed to think a certain way,
Yeah.
and that habitual way of thinking creates walls around us, and we don't get out beyond those walls. So the first step in reinventing yourself, and by the way, I love that we're talking reinvent yourself, because our mutual friend Rick Denley just
Yes.
wrote a book called Reinvent Yourself.
That's right.
And I just love that. And on hypnosis, um, free your mind, reinvent your life. That was back in 2005. I wrote that.
Yeah.
And the notion is that we all live behind invisible walls, and we try to use effort to push past them, but the effort doesn't work because the effort is us pushing against ourselves. We haven't yet, woken up.
Yeah.
So if you can wake up, if you can realize that you're not limited or defined by your role, you're not limited or defined by what you think your limitations are. Oh, I can't sing. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not tall enough. Whatever those things are, once you start recognizing those for what they are, which are programs,
Yeah.
then the world begins to open up. And then you can start to use a systematic process to get clearer and clearer and clearer about what reinvention looks like. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? How do you want to express yourself? None of those questions make any difference or of any value until you first unhypnotize yourself, until you first get out of your own pattern. Why? Because if you keep on staying in the same pattern, you'll just reinvent the same thing somewhere else.
Yeah.
How many people do you know who were in a relationship and the relationship tanked, and they're like, oh, that, she was just like my mother, right? And then they go out and find somebody else, and it's like, she's just like my mother, and she's just like my mother. And then the women are like, he's just like my father, and he's just like my father. All we're doing is we're creating this sort of frame or filter through which we see our lives, and we go out and we find somebody who matches this dance that we're doing unconsciously, and we just do the same dance over and over again with different people. So if you want to reinvent your life, please take some time off. Stop doing what you're doing. Reflect on who you are. Reflect on your desires. Quiet your mind. Meditate some. Travel some. Meet some new people. Find out what else is going on in the world before you, plant your flag on the next hill, which looks just like the hill before.
Yeah. And I think that's important from a sales standpoint, because it's no longer selling features, products, and benefits. You have got to create value, have that business acumen, be able to facilitate change. So you really have to unhypnotize the way that you've really, if you come from an old school selling standpoint, you've got to be able to do that. You got to almost reinvent the way you sell, because the tools are a lot different. Although sales is sales, but the mode and the method is different now.
Oh, so
So
much so. Well, you remember back in the day where it was all about kind of pushing people into a corner and making them, well, do you want to do it Tuesday or Wednesday? Do you want the big
right.
size or the small size? People see through that stuff nowadays,
Yeah.
right? And all the hyperbole, people see through all the hype. They don't respond as well as they used to a lot of that stuff. Whereas becoming more personal, becoming more a better listener, understanding what somebody's real needs are, asking the right questions, let people sell themselves.
Yeah. And I think it's how much can you give before you try to ask anybody for anything is becoming, is a really kind of you need to be hypnotized to that process almost now.
That's
If I
right.
were to say, Dr. Steve, success is in life or selling, how would you answer that?
I always go back to a quote that is meaningful to me, and it's been attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson, that to love often and laugh much, to know that even one life is breathed easier because you've lived, this is to have succeeded. It's success, but with significance. My life has to have a certain amount of significance, meaning that I've made an impact. I'm okay with the level I'm at, because to me, like, how much money I have doesn't define my success, but how free I feel does define my success, right? Am I free? Am I free to make choices that I'd like to make in my life? And sometimes prosperity, and I talk a lot about prosperity, I say prosperity isn't how much you have, but how little you need, right? Sometimes it's just a matter of figuring out what's going to serve you, what's going to fulfill you, and like get with that. Because otherwise, you know, what happens is people like chase the dollar, but it's never quite enough. It's always like, then there's
Yeah.
more, then there's more. And it's a game that, you know, that we play with ourselves that doesn't have any satisfying ending. So success has to involve, to me, it's about being conscious, meaning really knowing myself and what I really want and need, and contribution, helping others.
Awesome. What do you see lacking in the organizations that you work with from when you go in and work with us? What's the biggest thing? If I said, "Hey, Dr. Steve, you're going into company ABC and you've visited 200 companies over the course of several years, what's the biggest mindset gap there is? What's that biggest, if you were to narrow it down to one thing, hey, if I can teach your people this one thing about the mindset, they're going to get better at selling, what would that be?"
Fear. You
Ah,
know, more than anything else, it's not understanding the how to deal. Well, first of all, to have enough emotional intelligence to even know that you feel fear, right? Most people don't. Most people are unconscious to their own fear. They're acting nervous. They're trying to placate their clients, but they don't realize that it's all based in fear. So the ability, the willingness to say, "Oh, this what's happening. The energy in my body right now is the energy of fear." And I don't have to be ashamed of it, because we all have it, right? And being a salesperson, it induces a lot of it.
yeah.
Right. So first of all, it's recognizing it, and embracing and realizing that it's what you're feeling. And secondly, understanding what to do with it. Right. So those, if I could take you, I could take any sales professional, and within a period of a few days of a few guided exercises, have you transform your relationship with fear, you'd be infinitely better at what you do. And sometimes I do that. I've seen it happen in an instant,
Wow.
using the tools of hypnosis,
Yeah.
which is
Unbelievable.
mind-boggling. In fact, if you go on my Facebook page, at some point, not long ago, I posted in a video that came from a college show that I did back a few years ago, I guess 3 or 4 years ago. And I took a whole group of kids who were hypnotized, who I had on stage, about 20 kids, and I removed their fear of snakes. They're
Wow.
all deathly afraid of snakes. And I did it in about a minute. And then I had a friend of mine who has a 5-foot ball python come up on stage with his snake.
Oh,
And all the kids lined up to meet the snake. And they were holding it. And one of the girls started kissing the snake. It was pretty amazing. But I
man.
mean, imagine if your relationship with sales went from fear to love and joy, and, you know, acceptance, and, you know, you had this kind of delight in the process. It would change everything.
Yeah. All right. I got one more question for you. But before we
Right on.
get to that question, tell all the listeners what's the best way to get in touch with you if they want to get your books. I mean, you know, and you got UnHypnosis, Bulletproof. His latest book is Buddha in the Trenches, and that's about life's battlefields. That's a whole nother podcast right there. And the magic of inner selling, and then procrastination is a home study course you offer. So
Yeah,
people want to.
procrastination annihilation is like a 6-module course in understanding the psychology behind why you're procrastinating. And once you understand it and you know the methods, you blow right through it.
Yeah. So tell everybody how do they get in touch with you. What's the best way to get in touch with Dr. Steve Taubman?
Well, my website, stevetaubman.com, is kind of the clearinghouse for all my information, particularly if you're looking to have me come in and speak to an organization, or just want to see what my products look like,
Okay.
read my blog posts, or see the podcast or whatnot. That's a good place to start. If you're interested in seeing this book, Bulletproof, I've got a free digital download of the first chapter.
Okay.
And the way to get a hold of that free digital download, and there's a lot even in that first chapter that's going to kind of help you understand the model for success. What you do is you just go to bestofsteve.com,
Okay.
bestofsteve.com, and that gives you a place to get your free digital download of the first chapter. And it also will give you a code for later if you want to get the whole book at a discounted rate.
Okay. So all you listeners, make sure that you get to that website. I've actually been to the website. He's got some great video testimonials and you'll see some good footage of him on stage, and you'll get to see a lot just first-class organizations that he's worked with, from smaller organizations to some of the biggest. So get to that website, get these books. Last question for you, Dr. Steve, is you've got one sales vitamin today. I ask all my guests this. You've got one sales vitamin. And from I guess I say a mental coach, a mental mindfulness standpoint, what's that one sales vitamin you want to leave with the listeners?
That's another great question. So, okay, this is your vitamin because you could take this every day, couldn't you?
That's right.
And just kind of get that little bumper, that little boost.
Yep.
I started writing a book recently, and it's one of these days we'll finish it. But it's being co-authored by me and Jeff Hoffman, who is the founder of Priceline.
Oh.
And he's an international entrepreneurial giant. I mean, he's just an amazing human being. And the book is called The Power of Wonder.
Huh.
We're both fascinated by this idea of wonder. You know, we don't think about it. We don't make a conscious effort or decision or set an intention to come from a place of wonder. But that's the vitamin. You see, the vitamin is vitamin W, the vitamin of wonder, which basically means you wake up every morning and you treat this day as if it's the first time you've ever lived a day like this. You've never gone into that office before. You've never seen a person like that before. It's all new to you. It's all amazing to you. And that attitude, it's what they call beginner's mind. The beginner's mind attitude promotes the experience of astonishment and joy and kind of a childlike joy that people pick up on, and it's a very contagious energy, and it will make you feel better, but it'll also draw people to you magnetically. So the power of wonder is what is today's vitamin.
Awesome. So we've got a new vitamin that we've just created, vitamin W, and we'll have to promote that, and we will. I'm Dr. Steve. I'm grateful you came on today. I think that the listeners are just going to get a ton of what I like to call vitamins from this, and I'm grateful you came on today. Appreciate you spending some time, and so thankful that they got to hear your message.
John, it was a pleasure. I appreciate it.
You bet.